Lebanon on high alert this Thursday night. Israel's fresh attacks, Hezbollah's ultimatum, and the mounting anxiety of an all-out war. Federal election rejection, why a vote soon is even less likely now, and why this cabinet minister has whipped the Liberals to sit as an independent. MPs grill Via Rail executives, the scrutiny about an excruciating delay.
You need to get us out of here.
The left passengers without food, water, or bathrooms. And duped.
I wanted to return it to Canada.
The Italian man who bought this stolen portrait of Sir Winston Churchill.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Israel is stepping up attacks on Lebanon. Its warplanes tonight conducting dozens of strikes in southern Lebanon, hitting, it says, about 30 Hezbollah rocket launch sites. Hours earlier, Hezbollah blamed Israel for the thousands of pagers and walkie-talkies that have exploded across Lebanon. 37 people have been killed and almost 3,000 injured, including some children. Israel has not taken responsibility, but is the prime suspect. It's believed explosives were planted in everyday devices and detonated by electronic messages. And across Lebanon, there's deep unease now about what could blow up next. This British human rights lawyer says international law prohibits using booby traps disguised as harmless portable objects.
It's pretty obviously a war crime, and we should call it out for what it is. And if you can't assess with reasonable accuracy what the intended and the collateral damage is going to be, then it can't be proportionate.
How Hezbollah and Iran respond is what the world is watching. Redmond Shannon reports.
Listening to the reclusive leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, some of his words drowned out by the latest shocking blast of noise to hit Lebanon. Sonic booms from Israeli fighter jets flying low over Beirut. Those following Israeli bombing in southern parts of the country. And Lebanon's army carrying out controlled explosions of devices suspected to be booby-trapped. Nasrallah said that the 2 days of attacks on thousands of pagers and walkie-talkies are war crimes and a declaration of war.
He recognized and acknowledged that this is a severe blow for Hezbollah, particularly on the security front, but also at the human level.
Nasrallah claimed that top Hezbollah officials were not carrying the types of pagers that exploded Tuesday, and he promised to continue bombing Israel until Israel ends its war in Gaza.
And that's exactly the impact or the effect of attacks like this on Hezbollah and other terrorist groups. These attacks only empower these groups.
We may be learning more about how the brazen operation was organised. The New York Times reports that Israel had set up 3 shell companies to mask how its agents were producing pagers and shipping them to Hezbollah. And in Japan, the director of an electronics firm cast doubt on whether his factory made any of the walkie-talkies that exploded Wednesday. People in Lebanon are still reeling. Of course we're scared. My children are scared. Who can feel safe in this situation? Asks this man. I carry my phone, but I'm afraid of it, says another Beirut resident. There were further calls for calm from US Secretary of State Antony Blinken Thursday, but little sign either side is willing to listen.
Redmond, Hassan Nasrallah says Israel has crossed all red lines with these exploding devices, but that it will not bring Hezbollah down. Are there signs it's planning a fierce retaliation against Israel?
Well, despite his vow to continue bombing Israel, there is little doubt that Hezbollah's ability to respond has been severely restricted. Thousands of its members are injured, and now it needs to somehow rebuild a communication network without phones, pagers or walkie-talkies. Donna?
Okay, Redmond Shannon in London, thanks. Israeli intelligence says it's foiled an Iranian plot to assassinate Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This 73-year-old Israeli businessman appeared in court. He's accused of smuggling himself into Iran twice to meet with Iranian and intelligence officials over the plot to kill top Israeli leaders, including the defense minister and the head of Israel's domestic security agency. In Ottawa, the federal immigration minister is facing questions about two recently foiled terror plots in Canada. A parliamentary committee on national security and public safety wants Marc Miller to explain how the three accused men were able to enter the country. One was here on a student visa. The other was granted citizenship. Mercedes Stephenson is following this for us. Mercedes, what did Miller say?
Donna, we really didn't get any new information or answers about what his department has discovered in terms of the shortcomings that allowed these men to enter Canada. In fact, the minister repeatedly defended the way that the Canadian government undertakes security checks, saying they use biometrics and that they believe the system works. Of course, hearing that in the context of three back-to-back concerns, actually four people, three plots, to either kill or terrorize Canadians, raised a lot of questions. One new thing that did come up for discussion at committee that was interesting was about getting something called the police certificate from countries of origin. These are required for people who want to become permanent residents of Canada. They're not required for people who are coming in on a shorter visa like a student visa, something the Liberal government got rid of in 2018 and something the Conservatives were grilling Miller about today. Take a listen.
I think we should disabuse ourselves of the notion that Canada is hermetically sealed, and but for one procedure, we would have stopped something. It's highly theoretical. It's quite speculative.
It's actually not, Minister. I'm going to jump in because you require those police certificates for permanent residents.
And Donna, we know that there will be a review that the minister is promising to make public when it comes out in about the next 2 weeks. So we may get some answers then.
Okay, Mercedes in Ottawa, thanks. The federal Liberal minority government is expected to survive a non-confidence motion tabled by the Conservatives in Parliament next week. The Bloc Québécois has already said it will not vote to topple the government. Today, the NDP leader said he's also not prepared to help the Conservatives trigger an election. Mackenzie Gray explains why both parties seem comfortable propping up the government for now.
Our plan is to stop it.
Even after ripping up the deal with the Liberals,
we will not be supporting Pierre Poilievre's motion.
Nothing much has changed for the NDP.
We're not going to let Pierre Poilievre tell us what to do. We're not going to listen to someone who wants to cut the things that people need.
Jagmeet Singh still supporting the government, despite saying yesterday that they didn't deserve another chance.
Are you not giving him another chance today?
Not at all. Canadians will have that decision to make when the election comes.
That election now less likely to happen imminently. The NDP and Bloc both willing to negotiate with the Liberals to prop them up.
I never support Liberals. Help me God.
A suggestion Yves-François Blanchet doesn't care for.
I support the interests of Quebecers if those interests are also good for Canadians. So far, so good.
His two key demands would impact all Canadians: a 10% increase to old age security for those 65 to 74 and protecting supply management. Singh wants the Liberals to implement price controls on groceries and give help to renters. And to get those policies implemented, they need to work with Treasury Board President Anita Anand.
That I will truly and faithfully.
Who is now also the Transport Minister, after Pablo Rodriguez's resignation, bailing on the government just 2 days after the Liberals' Montreal by-election loss.
That is a decision that he made independently, and I wish him well.
Rodriguez, who will run for the Quebec Liberal leadership, isn't just quitting cabinet, but leaving the Liberal caucus completely to sit as an independent, distancing himself from Justin Trudeau.
It's not about the federal government anymore. They will do what they have to do, and I will do what I have to do on my side.
The Liberals were able to get the support of the Bloc and NDP without giving them anything, but that will likely change in the coming months, Donna, with the Conservatives promising to bring forward additional non-confidence motions as soon as possible.
Okay, Mackenzie in Ottawa, thanks. As Canadians wait for the next federal election, voters in New Brunswick go to the polls next month. After more than a year of political turmoil, Premier Blaine Higgs has called an election for October 21st, hoping for a third mandate. Silas Brown reports on the headwinds Higgs faces.
Following his visit with Lieutenant Governor Brendan Murphy that marks the official start of the campaign, PC leader Blaine Higgs laid out his pitch to voters, touting fiscal restraint, population growth, and increased health care spending.
We got us here, and we feel very proud of that. We want the opportunity to finish the job, and we have a team assembled that represents this entire province to do just that.
Higgs is looking to become the first premier to win 3 straight elections and consecutive majorities since Frank McKenna in 1995. But standing in his way is Liberal leader Susan Holt, who hopes to harness discontent over healthcare and the cost of living.
We're listening, and you're telling us it's time for a change.
Meanwhile, the Green Party, led by David Kuhn, hopes to make the leap from third party holding 3 seats in the legislature to government.
To my amazing candidates and their volunteers, when they say a Green government cannot be elected in New Brunswick, flash a big smile and keep knocking on those doors.
Recent polling data suggests the election will be close, likely coming down to a handful of urban ridings. Higgs faces some headwinds, with 12 incumbents opting not to run again. Over the past 18 months, he's dealt with resignations and an internal push to replace him over his leadership style and changes to school gender identity policy. More recently, he's clashed with Ottawa about its push for provinces to welcome more asylum seekers. In response to questions about his more recent focus on social issues, Higgs says that he, unlike other leaders, is willing to dive into tough topics.
I think it's important that we are able to talk about issues that many people are just afraid to talk about.
Higgs says he doesn't want this election to be about him, rather about the progress that he's delivered for the province over the last 6 years. But after 6 years in office, opposition parties say it's time for the electorate to have their say on his leadership. Silas Brown, Global News, Fredericton.
Another sex assault scandal has been revealed in the UK. This one focused on the former owner of Harrods department store. Mohammed Al Fayed, the billionaire whose son Dodi died with Princess Diana in a car crash, has been accused by 20 women, including some Canadians, who say they were sexually assaulted or raped by him. The women came forward in a BBC documentary. They detail alarming accounts of sexual assault and harassment that they say went on for years inside the luxury department store and in Al Fayed's other properties. The BBC investigation claims Harrods management not only knew about the allegations, but failed to intervene and even helped cover up some of the abuse allegations. Al Fayed died last year at the age of 94. It's designed to be alluring and addictive. Coming up, what happens to your brain when you're online gambling? Yesterday, we told you about the growing concerns over the lack of support for people who become addicted to online gambling. It's never been easier to place a bet. It exploded in Canada during the pandemic, and there's been a spike in calls to gambling support hotlines since then. Tonight, Jeff Semple looks at how online gambling affects the brain and how the games are designed to lure you in.
These bright lights disguise a darker truth. Many of these gambling machines are designed to be addictive, as Kathy Smith learned the hard way.
It just can spiral into total disaster.
She always enjoyed the casino, but when the pandemic hit, stuck at home, she found a slot machine at her fingertips.
My phone right with me. So anywhere I was, at work, at home, in the car, at a stoplight, just had to keep hitting those buttons.
Smith works in a hospital and says gambling offered an escape from the pressures of work. But before long, she'd lost more than $200,000.
The gambling part of me wants to keep gambling to win more money to pay off those debts. That's where it becomes a vicious cycle.
When your hands begin to sweat.
Psychologist Michael Dixon isn't surprised.
The most frequent outcome is the full loss.
He runs the Gambling Research Lab at the University of Waterloo. He wired me up with conductance sensors to reveal gambling's physiological power.
It's got these huge arousal-inducing properties, but also huge motivational properties.
He says the most insidious feature of some gambling machines, both real and virtual, is known as losses disguised as wins. For example, I bet 15 cents and lose 10, but you'd almost never know it. The machine chimes and suggests I've won 5 cents, even though I lost 10, which you need to look closely to see.
Celebrating the fact that you've lost money.
My autonomic excitement response spikes. It feels like I'm winning.
You get the same arousal response. So your heart will beat faster, your hands will start to sweat. From the body's perspective, they're the same. So that's where the danger lies.
The These machines are also designed to produce carefully timed near misses to keep players motivated. Ontario slot machines generate around $2 billion a year, but 60% of that revenue comes from just 2% of players, those with severe gambling problems, like Smith.
It terrifies and horrifies me, but yet I still couldn't stop myself.
She's still struggling to stop, with support from this Montreal addictions therapist, speaking out in hopes of breaking the stigma and encouraging others to seek help.
Because I'm sure it's like a silent epidemic. I'm sure there's many, many people that don't talk about it.
Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
Tomorrow, Jeff looks at when gambling leads to violence and how hitting rock bottom pushed this recovering addict into a life of helping others. The Israel CEO grilled ahead MPs' demand to know why passengers were left stranded on a train for hours. This historic wooden bridge in BC has gone up in flames. Fire engulfed the Red Bridge, built in 1936, and it collapsed early this morning. The RCMP says it's the second fire in less than 2 days there, and it's being treated as suspicious. People are being asked to avoid the area while crews battle hotspots and assess the damage. There's also a risk of debris floating down the river. Via Rail executives were called to account today for a troubling incident over the Labor Day long weekend. Some passengers were stranded on a Via train for 10 hours, and many say the situation got worse when food and water supplies ran low. As Kyle Benning reports, it's leading to calls for a rail passenger bill of rights, similar to the one for airlines.
One word sums up what happened on August 31st, unacceptable.
Weeks after paying customers were stranded on a Via train for 14 hours, its CEO apologized Thursday. But MPs on the House Transportation Committee say true accountability is also taking Via too long.
Over 2 years, and you still haven't reached anything efficient.
How can it be that such a short while later, we're still dealing with the same things? And that's communication.
Over the Labor Day weekend, passengers from Montreal to Quebec City were stuck on a train that experienced mechanical issues. A 3-hour trip became almost 5 times that, and customers weren't allowed off-rail cars to call for rides for safety reasons. Passengers claim Via workers said the train ran out of food and water 3 hours into the delay. At times, electricity, air conditioning, and washrooms had to be shut down. Via has commissioned an independent investigation into the incident and measures it could have taken. It did offer passengers compensation in the form of a credit valued at the same price as their ticket.
We actually contacted 10 bus companies. None were available.
This isn't the first time Via has been called before the committee.
If ever one of these events happens again, that the impacts on our passengers is minimized.
Last year, then CEO Martin Landry was called to testify about passengers being stranded near Cobourg, Ontario, during a winter storm that caused 3 days of holiday service disruption. It all has industry watchers wondering if it's a time for Via to seek new solutions to crisis situations.
You can't call 911 in that situation. There's no 911 anywhere close. So how do you get appropriate assistance?
Wayne Smith says rail travelers could also be protected by an expanded passenger bill of rights, perhaps offering some comfort to a sector where it's sometimes in short supply. Kyle Benning, Global News, Toronto.
Police often intervene in traffic incidents, but this case goes above and beyond. This pickup truck was spotted weaving down the highway in Michigan. The driver appeared to be having a medical emergency, so the police vehicle pulls up close and a female officer climbs out her passenger window and into the driver's side of the moving truck, crawling over the driver, guiding the vehicle safely to a stop. She's being commended for bravery. The sheriff's deputy says being a smaller person worked in her favor in this case, allowing her to slip through that window. Back in Canadian hands next, the last chapter in the saga of the stolen Churchill portrait as it makes its way home. This famous photo of former British Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill, taken by Yusuf Karsh in Ottawa, is back in Canadian hands tonight. It was stolen from the Chateau Laurier in Ottawa a couple of years ago and sold to an unsuspecting buyer in Italy. Eric Sorensen spoke with him as he gave up his historic purchase.
The Roaring Lion, unveiled and after nearly 3 years, returned to Canadian hands. An image that defined British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and the Canadian photographer Youssef Karsh. Karsh gave one of the original photographs to the Chateau Laurier Hotel, where he lived and had a studio for many years.
The Rolling Lion is not only an iconic image, but also part of our hotel's heritage.
It was returned by an unsuspecting Italian lawyer who bought it and hung it in his living room till authorities confirmed it had been stolen.
I immediately decided to return it to the Chateau Laurier because I think that if Mr. Karsh donated it to the hotel, it means that it really wanted it to stay there.
At Christmas time in 2021, or just a little after, the genuine Karsh photograph was taken from the reading lounge wall in the Chateau Laurier and replaced by a slightly smaller fake. The original was taken overseas and in May 2022 was sold at auction by Sotheby's. The buyer, Nicola Casinelli, paid a little over $9,000, unaware of what he had. In August 2022, hotel staff discovered the replica and put up the notice that the historic original was gone. December 1941, Churchill visited Washington to develop war strategy with the U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt. And after spending Christmas at the White House, Churchill came to Ottawa.
He was welcomed there by a Canadian Guard of Honor.
He gave a rousing speech to rally Canadians who were already fighting the war.
If anybody likes to play rough, we can play rough too.
Right after, Youssef Karsh was given a moment to take Churchill's picture, who had lit a cigar. Karsh plucked the cigar from his lips, and a moment later, this was Churchill, glowering for history. Churchill then smiled, told Karsh to take another. But the smiling Churchill was not the steadfast Churchill that history chose to remember. Nicola Casinelli says he plans to visit Ottawa to see his piece of history when it's back at the Chateau Laurier. And now, this replica that he bought for $55 sits in the corner of his living room, where he has quite a story to tell. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Quite a story. That is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Bowring Park in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.